The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning at Earth's Deep Space Communication Center. At first, the operators thought it was just another routine transmission from one of humanity's outer colonies. But as the decoded signal filled their screens, their eyes widened with disbelief. "Please, help us. We are dying." The message, repeated in perfect English, transmitted across thousands of light years through advanced quantum channels. Within hours, the United Defense Council gathered in their underground chamber beneath Geneva. The room buzzed with tension as Admiral Wilson played the full message for the assembled leaders. A hologram appeared in the center of the round table. The alien's form was slim and tall, with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Its gray skin shimmered slightly as it spoke. "People of Earth, we are the Greys. Our civilization spans 27 star systems, or rather, it did. The Hunters came 6 months ago. They destroy everything in their path. We asked the Centauri Alliance for help. They refused. We begged the Orion Federation. They turned away. You are our last hope." The room erupted in whispers. Humans weren't the most advanced species in the galaxy. Far from it. Most alien civilizations viewed Earth as a newcomer to the galactic stage, barely worth noticing. Yet here was an advanced race asking for their help. "There's more," Admiral Wilson said, his weathered face grave. The hologram continued. "We know you are young among the stars, but we have watched you. Your species possesses something unique, the ability to achieve victory even when outmatched. We offer payment in advanced technology, but we know you might refuse like the others. So we appeal not to your greed, but to your hearts. Will you help us?" President Roberts stood up, her short frame commanding attention. "What's our current fleet status?" General Thompson cleared his throat. "That's the problem, ma'am. 90% of our modern fleet is tied up defending the Proxima and Ta Ceti colonies from those pirates. All we have immediately available are the older ships, the ones we were planning to recycle or turn into museums." "How many?" 15 combat-capable vessels. The newest is 25 years old. The oldest, well, the Challenger is pushing 30. The defense minister laughed bitterly. "So even if we wanted to help, we'd be sending antiques against what sounds like an advanced hostile force. It would be suicide." An unexpected voice spoke up. Dr. Linda Martinez, the head of xenobiology, had been quietly taking notes. "Maybe not. Look at the data attached to their message. The Hunters use highly advanced energy weapons and shields, but our older ships, they still use physical projectiles, rail guns, missiles. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," finished Admiral Wilson, a glint in his eye. "They won't be expecting that." President Roberts walked slowly around the table, looking at each council member. "The vote stands at 7 against intervention, 6-4. I have the final say." She paused at the hologram, studying the desperate alien's frozen image. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about being a small-town firefighter. He said something I never forgot. When someone's house is burning, you don't ask about their politics or their ability to pay. You just help." She straightened her jacket. "Send the response. Help is coming. And get me a list of our best retired officers who still remember how to fight with the old ships. Looks like some of our museums are going back to war." As the council dispersed, Admiral Wilson stayed behind, staring at the star map showing the gray territory. The odds were terrible. The ships were old, but sometimes that's exactly what you needed. People and machines that knew how to fight dirty. He smiled slightly, remembering his first command on an old destroyer. Maybe it was time to remind the galaxy that humanity didn't need the fanciest toys to get the job done. Sometimes all you needed was courage, cleverness, and a stubborn refusal to give up. The response was sent, and across Earth's orbital shipyards, lights began coming on in vessels long thought obsolete. The rescue mission was about to begin. Admiral James Miller stood in his backyard, looking at the stars when they came to find him. He was watering his tomato plants, something he'd taken up after retiring 3 years ago. The military car pulled up quietly, and 2 officers stepped out. "They're really desperate if they're calling you back, old man," his wife said from the porch, trying to hide her worry with humor. 4 hours later, Miller walked through the massive hangar of Orbital Station 7, staring up at his new command. The U.S. Challenger floated in the dock, her hull showing signs of age. She wasn't pretty like the new ships with their sleek energy shields and plasma cannons. The Challenger was built when humans still believed in thick armor and big guns. "She's not much to look at anymore," said Captain Tom Reed, his newly assigned second in command. "But all her rail guns still work." Miller ran his hand along a worn wall. "How long to get her ready?" "Engineering says 3 days. We're bringing back a lot of the old crew who used to serve on these types of ships. The young ones don't know how to handle manual targeting systems." Around them, the hangar buzzed with activity. 14 other old ships were being prepared. Miller watched as crews loaded physical ammunition, solid metal rounds for the railguns, actual missiles with explosive warheads. The newer ships didn't use these anymore, preferring energy weapons. "Sir," a young lieutenant approached with a tablet. "Here's the crew roster. We've mixed veteran officers with fresh graduates. The veterans know the old systems, and the young ones are eager to learn." Miller scrolled through the names. Many were people he'd served with before, pulled out of retirement just like him. Others were newcomers, probably disappointed to be assigned to such an old ship instead of the flashy new ones. In the officers' mess hall that evening, Miller met his senior staff. Chief Engineer Bill Parker hadn't changed much, still had grease on his hands even at dinner. Weapons Officer Lisa Cooper was older now, but her eyes lit up when talking about the rail gun systems she'd managed decades ago. "The younger ones think we're crazy," Cooper said, sipping her coffee. "They keep asking why we don't have energy shields." Miller smiled. "Because sometimes the old ways work better. You can't dodge what you can't see coming, and our solid rounds move too fast for modern tracking systems." A commotion at the hall's entrance drew their attention. The Gray Ambassador, First Light, had arrived to inspect the fleet. The alien's large eyes widened even further as it looked around the old ship. "These vessels," First Light's translator clicked. "They are not what we expected." "No," Miller agreed. "They're better. Your enemies expect energy weapons and matching shields. They'd forgotten about simple physics. A 20-pound metal slug moving at 10% of light speed doesn't care about energy shields." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. The Challenger's engines roared to life for the first time in years. Her old reactor hummed steadily, less powerful than modern cores but far more reliable. Teams ran drills, learning to work with systems that required actual human control instead of AI assistance. On the morning of launch, Miller stood on his bridge. Around him, screens flickered to life, old LCD displays instead of holograms, but they worked just fine. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the other ships of his fleet moving into formation. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Reed announced. Miller took his command chair, feeling its familiar shape. The leather was cracked, but it felt like coming home. He looked at his crew, the old veterans who'd answered the call one last time, the young officers learning to appreciate the old ways. They were ready. "Send to all ships," he ordered. "Let's go remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't need fancy technology to get the job done. We just need guts, skill, and a few thousand tons of tungsten rounds." The fleet accelerated away from Earth, 15 old warriors heading out for one last dance. Somewhere out there, the hunters were about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating outdated technology. After 30 days of space travel, the human fleet arrived at the edge of gray territory. The sight that greeted them made even the most hardened veterans fall silent. 3 destroyed planets drifted in space, their surfaces cracked like broken eggs. Debris fields stretched for millions of miles, the remains of gray ships and stations. Multiple contacts on long-range sensors called out the radar operator on the Challenger's bridge. Looks like gray refugee ships hiding in the asteroid belt. Admiral Miller stood from his command chair. Send the recognition signal we were given. Let them know we're the help they asked for. Minutes later, a gray ship emerged from behind a large asteroid. It was beautiful in a strange way, all curves and shining metal, though its hull showed battle damage. The ship was twice the size of the Challenger, but moved with incredible grace. They're requesting permission to dock, Captain Reed reported. Their ambassador wants to meet. Miller nodded. Granted. And someone find our ambassador some sunglasses. Remember, their eyes are sensitive to our lighting. The docking was tricky. The gray ship's advanced systems had trouble connecting with the Challenger's simple mechanical docking ring. Finally, with some old-fashioned manual adjustments, they made it work. First Light entered the bridge, wearing protective goggles. The alien diplomat stopped and looked around, confusion clear on their delicate features. These controls, they are all manual? First Light asked, touching a metal switch with long gray fingers. Mostly, Miller replied. We find buttons and levers more reliable than neural interfaces. They work even when the power's out. First Light moved to the main display, where tactical data showed on a simple screen. But where are your quantum computers? Your AI battle systems? Don't have them, Miller said simply. Don't need them. Now tell me about these hunters. We need to know what we're up against. The Gray Ambassador activated a small device, projecting an image of a hunter ship. It was aggressive looking, all sharp angles and glowing weapons ports. Their technology is far advanced from what you have here. Energy shields that can stop plasma bolts, weapons that tear through quantum-reinforced armor. Miller interrupted politely. What about regular armor? Plain old metal? I don't know, First Light admitted. No one uses that anymore. It's too primitive. A smile crossed Miller's weathered face. Sometimes primitive is good. Show me their attack patterns. For the next hour, First Light displayed battle after battle. The hunters were predictable. They relied on their superior technology, always expecting their enemies to fight the same way. They used complex scanning systems to detect energy buildups in enemy weapons, advanced shields tuned to stop energy attacks. Look here, Miller pointed to a particular moment in one battle. Their shields take 1.3 seconds to adjust to new energy frequencies, but they're always on, always using power. Yes, First Light agreed. It's their greatest defense. No, Miller said, it's their weakness. They're so focused on stopping energy weapons, they've forgotten about simple physics. Captain Reed, prepare a demonstration. Load a single rail gun round. The Challenger's main gun rumbled as it prepared to fire. First Light watched curiously as Miller selected an asteroid about the same size as a hunter ship. Watch carefully, Miller said. This is what we brought to the fight. The rail gun fired. There was no beam of light, no glowing plasma bolt, just a simple piece of metal, accelerated to incredible speed. The asteroid simply ceased to exist, transformed into a cloud of dust by the impact. First Light's large eyes grew even wider. That? How? There was no energy signature to detect. No warning. Exactly, Miller smiled. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Your people asked for help, and we brought exactly what you needed. Ships too primitive for the hunters to take seriously. The alien diplomat looked around the bridge again, but this time with new respect. Perhaps we were right to call Earth after all. We'll find out soon enough, Miller said, looking at the tactical display where hunter ships had just appeared at the edge of the system. Because here they come. Time to show them why humanity never got rid of all its old toys. The Challenger's ancient engines rumbled to life, and across the fleet, rail guns began to warm up. The real test was about to begin. 3 hunter ships moved through space like sharks, their dark hulls gleaming with advanced energy shields. They hadn't noticed the human fleet yet, too focused on hunting down the gray refugee ships hiding in the asteroid field. On the Challenger's bridge, Admiral Miller watched them approach. His old ship hung silent, running on minimal power. Around them, the rest of the human fleet was scattered among the asteroids, waiting. "They're not even looking for physical ships," Captain Reed whispered, studying the sensor readings. "Their scanners are all set for energy signatures." Miller nodded. "That's because no one uses primitive ships anymore." He turned to his crew. "Combat stations. Let's teach them why that's a mistake." The hunter ships came closer. At 5,000 kilometers, they would normally have detected any modern fleet. But the human ships, with their simple nuclear engines and thick metal hulls, were nearly invisible to advanced sensors designed to spot energy shields and plasma weapons. "All ships," Miller spoke quietly into his radio. "Execute Battle Plan Alpha. Remember your training." The Challenger's rail guns were loaded with tungsten rounds, each weighing as much as a small car. These simple projectiles had been the backbone of human space combat for decades before energy weapons became popular. "Target the lead ship," Miller ordered. "Aim for their engine section. Fire when ready." The railgun fired silently in space. The round, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossed the distance in seconds. The hunter ship's captain probably never even knew what hit them. Their advanced shields, designed to stop energy weapons, might as well have been tissue paper against the kinetic impact. The hunter ship split in half, its shields useless against simple physics. "All ships, open fire," Miller commanded. The human fleet revealed itself, emerging from behind asteroids like ghosts. Railguns thundered silently in space, old-style missiles, carrying simple explosive warheads, launched in swarms. The remaining hunter ships reacted with confusion. Their shields flared uselessly as physical projectiles tore through them. They tried to return fire with their energy weapons, but the human ship's thick metal armor absorbed the hits better than any energy shield. "They're trying to adapt their shields," the sensor operator reported. "But they can't generate a kinetic barrier strong enough without dropping their energy shields." Miller allowed himself a small smile. That's the problem with over-specialization. They forgot the basics. The battle was shockingly brief. Within minutes, all 3 hunter ships were reduced to drifting wreckage. The human fleet had suffered only minor damage. Their old-fashioned armor had held. First Light, who had watched the entire battle from the Challenger's bridge, was stunned. "In all our battles, we never. How did you know this would work?" "Simple," Miller explained, pointing to the tactical display. "Your people, the hunters, everyone in this part of space got so focused on energy weapons and quantum shields that you forgot about basic kinetic impacts. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." The crew cheered as damage reports came in. Minimal injuries, all ships still combat capable. But Miller knew this was just the beginning. "Send word to the gray refugee ships," he ordered. "Tell them it's safe to come out. And get me all the data they have on hunter patrol routes. They'll adapt to our tactics eventually. But until then, we hunt the hunters," Captain Reed finished with a grim smile. Over the next few hours, the gray ships emerged from hiding. They gathered around the human fleet, their primitive, outdated saviors. Engineers from both species began working together, sharing data and strategies. "We need to move quickly," Miller told his officers during the debriefing. "We have the advantage of surprise now, but it won't last. The hunters will report back to their fleet about what happened here." He looked at the star map, plotting their next move. "But when they do report back, they'll have to admit something their pride won't want to accept. They were defeated by weapons hundreds of years out of date." The human fleet began preparing for their next battle. In the debris field that had once been 3 hunter ships, a simple tungsten round drifted past, barely scratched from its journey through an advanced energy shield. Sometimes, the old ways really were the best ways. Over the next week, the human fleet moved like ghosts through gray territory. They struck hunter patrols and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Admiral Miller had studied old submarine warfare tactics from Earth's oceans, and now he used them in space. Power down all non-essential systems, Miller ordered as the Challenger drifted behind a large moon, just like a submarine going silent. Below the ship, a hunter patrol passed by, their advanced sensors scanning for energy signatures. They never looked for cold metal ships hiding in natural sensor shadows. The humans had learned to use gravity wells and radiation fields to mask their presence. They're still looking for energy weapons and shield signatures, Captain Reed whispered, though no one in space could hear them. They haven't figured out how to track our ships yet. The Challenger's crew waited silently. Years of fighting with advanced technology had made the hunters forget about basic tactics. They didn't check for simple metal objects or watch for ships hiding behind planets. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta, Miller commanded once the patrol was in position. 5 human ships emerged from different hiding spots. Their rail guns fired simultaneously. Simple metal slugs ripped through the hunter vessels before they could raise their energy shields. This time, however, one hunter ship managed to send a distress signal before exploding. They're learning, Miller noted, starting to keep their shields up all the time. But that drains their power. The human fleet regrouped quickly. They had developed a new tactic, using their ship's thick armor to get close, then firing their weapons point blank. The hunters' energy weapons were deadly at long range, but less effective against old-fashioned metal plating at close distances. First Light, who now served as a permanent advisor on the Challenger, studied the battle recordings. Other species are watching these battles. They're amazed. No one has fought the hunters like this before. That's because everyone else tried to match their technology, Miller explained. We're fighting them with what we know works. The fleet's success had inspired the Gray refugees. Their ships began copying human tactics, turning off their advanced systems and relying on simpler methods. Some even started installing physical armor over their energy shields. Later that day, the fleet discovered something important. A Gray scout ship found a hunter supply base hidden in an asteroid field. It was poorly defended, as the hunters never expected anyone to find it without advanced sensors. This is our chance, Miller told his officers. We can hurt their operations in this whole sector. But we need to be smart about it. He outlined his plan. It was simple but clever, just like their ships. Half the fleet would attack directly, drawing attention. The other half would sneak around behind the base using the asteroid field for cover. The battle began at close range. Human ships charged straight in, their thick armor absorbing hits. Rail guns fired continuously, releasing streams of metal slugs that shredded hunter ships. Missiles followed paths through the asteroid field, hitting the base from unexpected angles. They're calling for help, the radio operator reported. Large hunter fleet responding. Miller smiled. Just as planned. All ships, execute Operation Hammer and Anvil. As the hunter reinforcements arrived, they found themselves caught between 2 groups of human ships. The hunters' advanced targeting systems were confused by the asteroids and debris, while the human gunners, using simple optical sights and manual controls, had no such problems. The battle turned into chaos. Hunter ships, designed for long-range energy weapon duels, found themselves in a close-quarters brawl. Human vessels, built to take hits and keep fighting, proved remarkably durable. Base defenses are down, Captain Reed reported. Their supply depot is exposed. All ships, fire everything we have, Miller commanded. The combined firepower of 15 human ships reduced the hunter base to rubble. As the dust settled, the remaining hunter vessels fled, their fancy sensors blinded by debris, and their energy shields depleted. First Light watched the tactical display with amazement. You destroyed their main supply base in this sector, with obsolete ships. Not obsolete, Miller corrected. Just different. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The entire bridge crew finished with him, now familiar with their admiral's favorite saying. The human fleet regrouped, ready for whatever came next. They had won this battle. But the war was far from over. The warning came from a gray scout ship. The main hunter fleet was coming. Over 50 ships, including their massive flagship. They had finally decided to crush the human fleet that had caused them so much trouble. Admiral Miller stood on the Challenger's bridge, looking at the tactical display. His fleet of 15 old ships had taken damage over the past weeks. They were still fighting fit, but they couldn't win a direct battle against such overwhelming numbers. "They think they have us cornered," he said, studying the star map. "Let's use that against them." The plan he proposed was either brilliant or crazy. The fleet would hide inside a massive debris field, the remains of an old space station. With them, they'd brought something special, 3 abandoned gray mining ships they had found. "Those mining ships are full of explosive ore," Miller explained to his officers. "When processed wrong, it becomes highly unstable. Perfect for our needs." Captain Reed nodded in understanding. "We're going to make a trap." The human fleet worked quickly. They positioned the mining ships carefully, hiding them among the debris. Each old human vessel found a hiding spot, powering down to avoid detection. They would only get one chance at this. Hunter fleet entering the system, the sensor operator announced. 53 ships total. Their flagship is twice the size of anything we've seen before. Miller took his command chair. The bridge was dark, running on minimal power. Now we see if they've learned anything about looking for ships the old way. The Hunter fleet moved forward confidently, their energy shields glowing bright against the darkness of space. Their advanced sensors swept the area, but found nothing. The human ships, cold and quiet, looked like just more debris to their scanners. "They're entering the kill zone," Reed whispered. Miller waited until the Hunter fleet was deep inside the debris field. Their ships had to slow down to navigate safely, exactly as planned. "All ships, execute Operation Thunderbolt," Miller commanded. The trap was sprung. Human ships powered up suddenly, their rail guns already aimed at key targets. But this time, they weren't just firing metal slugs. They were targeting the mining ships they had positioned. The first mining ship exploded spectacularly, its volatile cargo creating a massive shockwave. The Hunter ship's energy shields flared as they tried to adapt. The second mining ship detonated before they could recover. "Now," Miller ordered, "all ships, fire everything." Rail guns roared. Missiles streaked through space. The human fleet had positioned themselves perfectly, catching the Hunter ships in a crossfire. The explosions from the mining ships had overloaded many of their shields, leaving them vulnerable. The Hunter flagship tried to coordinate a response, but in the confined space of the debris field, their advanced targeting systems were worse than useless. They couldn't tell ships from debris, and human vessels were appearing and disappearing behind floating wreckage. The Challenger took several direct hits but kept fighting. Her thick armor, scorched and dented, held together. Miller watched as human gunners, using simple optical sights, picked their targets carefully. "Their formation is breaking," Reed called out. "They're trying to retreat." But retreat wasn't easy in a debris field, especially with more explosions adding to the chaos. Hunter ships collided with each other and with debris as they tried to escape. The battle reached its peak when Miller ordered a direct attack on the Hunter flagship. The Challenger, along with 3 other human ships, charged straight at the massive vessel. Their rail guns fired continuously, concentrating on one spot in its shields. Hull breach detected on their flagship. The sensor operator reported excitedly. "Their shields are failing." The Hunter flagship, for all its advanced technology, couldn't handle the constant barrage of physical impacts. Its shields collapsed, and armor designed to resist energy weapons proved useless against kinetic rounds. When the flagship finally exploded, the remaining Hunter ships fled in panic. The debris field was now twice as large, filled with the remains of what had once been the proud Hunter fleet. Miller looked around his bridge. The Challenger was damaged but intact. Most of his fleet had survived. though every ship bore the scars of battle. "Send word to the Gray Worlds," he ordered. "Tell them the Hunter fleet is defeated. Their people are safe now." The bridge crew cheered, but Miller remained focused. They had won the largest battle yet, but he knew the war wasn't over. Still, they had proven something important today. Sometimes the oldest tricks work the best. 2 months after the final battle, the U.S. Challenger led the human fleet back toward Earth. The old ship's hull showed countless scars, patches, and repairs, each mark telling a story of survival against impossible odds. On the bridge, Admiral Miller stood with First Light, watching as other alien ships escorted them home. But these weren't gray vessels. They were diplomatic ships from dozens of species, including some that had originally refused to help the Greys. "The Centauri Alliance has requested permission to study your primitive weapons," First Light said, amusement clear in their voice. "They're particularly interested in your railgun designs." Miller chuckled. Funny how quickly outdated becomes innovative when it works. News of the human victory had spread across the galaxy. The story of 15 obsolete ships defeating the feared Hunter fleet had become an instant legend. Even more surprising was how it changed the way other species thought about technology. Captain Reed entered the bridge with a data tablet. "Sir, the latest reports from Gray Space. 3 more Hunter fleets have surrendered. They're requesting peace talks. Apparently, they don't want to face any more primitive weapons." The crew had changed over the months of fighting. Young officers who had once been disappointed to serve on an old ship now wore their posts with pride. They had learned that fancy technology wasn't everything. Skill, courage, and clever thinking mattered more. "Admiral," First Light said formally, "my people have prepared a gift for Earth." They handed over a small data crystal. "This contains designs for our most advanced technologies, but we hope you won't replace all your old ships. They've proven too valuable." Miller nodded in agreement. The war had taught everyone an important lesson. New wasn't always better, and sometimes the simple solutions worked best. The fleet approached Earth's orbit, and a surprising sight greeted them. Hundreds of ships had gathered to welcome them home. Not just human vessels, but ships from across the galaxy. Many were older models that had been brought out of retirement, inspired by the Challenger's success. "Look at that," Reed pointed to a group of Centauri ships. "They've added physical armor over their energy shields. Everyone's learning from us now." The Challenger's communications officer spoke up. "Sir, we're receiving messages from all over Earth. They want to know if it's true. Did we really win using museum pieces?" "Tell them," Miller said proudly, "that we won because of those museum pieces. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Later that day, in Earth's orbital station, Miller attended a ceremony with his crew. President Roberts stood before representatives from 100 worlds, making the historic announcement. "The U.S. Challenger and her fleet will not be decommissioned as planned," she declared. "Instead, they will become the core of a new training fleet. Sometimes we must look to our past to find our way forward." First Light presented each crew member with a Gray Medal of Honor, the first time their people had ever awarded it to non-Grays. "You reminded the galaxy of something important," they said. "That wisdom doesn't always come in the newest package." After the ceremony, Miller walked through the Challenger one last time. The ship would be preserved as a museum, but not just for display. She would be kept ready, a reminder that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. In the years that followed, the Miller Doctrine became standard teaching in space combat schools across the galaxy. It taught that true strength came not from having the newest technology, but from using what you had wisely. The Hunters, after their defeat, found themselves treated differently by other species. Their technological superiority no longer inspired fear, not when everyone knew they'd been beaten by obsolete human ships. As Miller finally retired, again, he spent more time in his garden. But now he had a new audience for his stories, young officers from a dozen species, all eager to learn about the old ways of space combat. And in orbit above Earth, the Challenger remained, her battle-scarred hull a testament to one simple truth. Sometimes, the oldest solutions are the best ones. Not because they're old, but because they're proven. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Technology alone didn't win battles. Courage, skill, and cleverness did. And those qualities never went out of date.